Hi, I wanted to just go through a quick review of a project that I've been working on in N8N. And it's not perfect and it's messy, but this is the whole build in public thing, right? So I just wanted to share some cool stuff and some things that I'm still working through just as I learn N8N. And you'll see some cool stuff here. The who is, hacker target, and then there's also api.api.fi.com as well. These are some nodes that I'm using that have really started to blow the lid off what I can do with N8N. And I'm really happy to share them. And I think that they will be really interesting for you to see. So the concept of what I'm creating, a lead lookup tool, and it then does some enrichment and looks at the client website and the network infrastructure behind that to identify if there's going to be a match between the services that can be provided and the services that the client is running. So my trigger point is nothing fancy. It is when clicking test workflow. So basically what I've set up here is a basic query for looking for accounting firm in Sydney. That is then getting passed into API-Fi. So the query here is, this is my search term. This is what I would be entering into Google to then look at for lead generation. And this is for a mate, actually. I'm just helping him out. So the idea is that we are using API-Fi because I need a way to take my Google search and then transport that into a Google sheet. And what I want to capture is every single business that is an accounting firm that is located in Sydney. And we're capturing this from the Google Maps API, or I think it's called Google Places now. So there's a couple of ways that I figured out that I could do it. The first way was in Google Cloud, actually using the Google Cloud console and setting up an API request, and I've got a bunch of free credits because I just signed up. Then setting up all the permissions, and then using this HTTP request node in N8N to call that and make it happen. I had some issues in the way that the data was structured, and then as I was just kept trying different things and looking for a different strategy, somehow managed to stumble across, I think it must have been a YouTube clip called something on API-Fi, and how to do it using that instead. The difference is API-Fi is it's something per 1,000 records. I think it might be $9 per 1,000 records. And I think that might be expensive. I don't really have any context. I need to double check, and I could be misspeaking here, but I think it's a little bit expensive. So what I'd like to do is build this as an MVP, get it working. Once I've proven it and I like how my system works, then of course I will start all over again using the Google method, and hopefully that will be cheaper. At the very least, I can use up some of the credits that Google has kindly issued as I'm a new sign-up-y. So what we've got at the moment is it's spinning away, and I don't know, with all of my playing around, if I've broken my workflow and that's why it's taking so long, or if it just so happens that it's taking a long time because it's a busy time of day. So with N8N, what we have is the input, and that is from that trigger flow. So starting with that trigger, it's what's that information that has to go into the API query. My query is accounting firms in Sydney. And then in setting up the HTTP request, which is the actual node that I've used to call the API from, I really resisting the urge to call it Appify, because that would just be nice and easy. And you can see in the URL here, it's Lucas Krivka. So what this person has done is made this so much easier for us to access the Google Maps API. So Lucas has done this amazing job. And when you sign up to API-Fi, you can see here I've used $3.86 of my $5 that I got when I first signed up, which has been really nice because I can just keep running it and keep testing. I'll top that up soon. This is how it got built out. So my search term, I typed in accounting firm, and then I used location of Sydney. This was an important one. This is the search result limiter. If I just went ahead and, I want to go and get 1,000 results, sure, this would definitely work. What is going to happen? Well, straight away, we're going to hit $9 because it's $9 per 1,000 results. Realistically, I want a good data set to generate. And what I'll show in a second is that it's actually quite important to have not just one result, but 50, because not everyone was providing the same data. Some of the Google Places results weren't showing that they had a LinkedIn, that they had an email and a phone. What they were showing was less. That was probably for the first maybe 20 or 30 results that they didn't have that information. And that was a little confusing, but this is what I've seen so far. So I've used the Google Maps email extractor on API-Fi, and then I've clicked on API in the top right-hand corner, API endpoints. This is the one. So we click on a drop down in the top right-hand corner, API, then API endpoints. I have chosen to use run active synchronously and get dataset items. It is a post request. I have just blindly followed this from the tutorial that I did. I've then copied that string, gone back to N8N. So the way that they do their authentication is that they put the API key that you need to then make the request into the URL. So there's some other tutorials for other tools, especially if you're following Liam Otley's Ultimate Beginners tutorial. In VoiceFlow, you're actually playing with the headers. And so you are using something like XAuth, or I think it's authorization. So some APIs respond a little bit differently. And then if you're in America, it'd be a Z, or it might have to be a Z in general, actually, because that's how systems are built. So I might do it like this. And that might be the way that I do it. But for these guys, it's not done that way. So we don't need to worry about using headers. So we can turn that right off. Authentication, while it is set to none, doesn't matter because the authentication is actually in here. It is in the URL already. And what generally happens, now they don't actually have an example of this, which is a bit of a bummer. But what I've seen recently is that some APIs allow you to have a curl request. There's this lovely import curl button here. When you paste the curl command in and then you click on import, it does all this stuff for you. So if it does require headers, then they will write that in the header and you can click on that. And that's actually a service that's provided by Hacker Target. And you can click on import curl and it just makes it happen. It's amazing. So it's a real time saver. So the first thing that I actually look for when I'm importing or using APIs now is, do they have curl? Is there a curl URL that I can use? Curl just means client URL. And it makes life so much easier. So what I've got is a little bit of JSON. Because I want to keep things dynamic, I'm not just going to do this with one result. I want to have it iterate through a loop. I've decided to set it up with a JSON variable. In this instance, if you look at the schema, it doesn't matter whether you look at schema, table, or JSON. This is the same data, right? This is the same data that will be imported. It's just that if I look in the JSON view, that means, actually, if I'm in the JSON view or the schema view, it means that I can drag the actual key over here and plonk it straight in. And that's what I want to do. So it's a little bit backwards here. We've got location query, JSON.location, which is actually Sydney. And then the query is accounting firm. So what is really cool about N8N, the way that it works it is showing me the input on the left, the bits that I get to change in the middle. So as we've been doing, things like it's a GET request instead of a POST request. So we're pulling data instead of sending it. We've got our authorization and the URL to contact the API. So we want to talk to a server. Well, where are we going? We specify that with a URL. If you go into a website, you enter in a domain name. This is still a domain name. It just has a whole bunch of extra stuff on the end of that domain, including the API key. Then we have actually specified the JSON query as well, which is what we expect to receive. At the moment, because this query is taking so long to run, I fear that I have broken something. But what would happen is it would show up a table on the right-hand side with the results. And you know what? I think it's probably because I'm about to run out of credits, and that's maybe why it's not loading. Anyway, for now, that's what's meant to happen. We'll see if the rest of the workflow is going to work. Then in edit fields, okay, so this whole thing is broken now, but basically what happens is it returns all of the, and I do have the data so I can show you how it ends up presenting in the working state. On the left, it has all the JSON with all of these details. And this is all of these JSON keys have been extracted from everything that was returned from that API call. So we're now on the third node. We are in edit fields, but everything that was extracted from here was then presented to us in the input. So it's like a building block. Things that you get from the last node then come into input, and then we can modify that data and then go into output. Each node is a little bit different, and so you have to remember at what stage of this workflow you're at. You only put the API key in and the API URL at the start, because once you've authenticated, it grabs that data, and then the data is sitting on our desk, so to speak, waiting for us to do something with it. We don't need to keep calling that API. In fact, if we call the API every time, we're just burning money, really. There's no need to. We've requested that data, then we have it sitting in memory in our N8N instance, and then we will then modify that to save in a spreadsheet, because we want to store it somewhere. And the way that I want to do it is store it in a spreadsheet, and then I can manipulate that data and then additionally run additional nodes to enrich it even further. So going from the org name, or this is the company name, the business name, their address, their phone number, their website, the category. The category is what comes up when you use Google Maps. So for this instance, not only do we have accounting firms, but there are these subcategories that exist as well. And what we start to see is bookkeeping services under that heading of accounting firm. And then we're able to catch some emails, and if we're lucky, the LinkedIn website as well. So this is really good because this allows us to build that profile of our client, and then we can pass that data into other nodes to further enrich it and maybe do some lead qualification, looking at their LinkedIn, for example. We might say, oh, they're 5,000 employees, and we only want businesses that have 50,000 employees. Using that information, we could exclude that from our list. Okay, so we've got that. Then it dumps it into a Google Sheet. So this is the cool part. So when I got this working, this was super exciting. And it wasn't as hard to set up as you would expect. All it is, we're using a Google Sheets account. So using or OAuth2, I have a separate email account set up, or a separate Gmail account set up that I wanted to use for this development activity and all this testing. And that was just in case I did something silly with the permissions by accident and exposed my entire Google Drive or entire mailbox to the world by accident, because that would be pretty bad. So I've created that. Then I've clicked on create new credential, clicked on sign in with Google, and then you get a pop-up box to authenticate, and then you can log in, and then you are connected to Google Sheets with this credential. There is a credential manager within N8N. It's on the main workflow. I'll just go back to overview. We'll save. And then go into credentials. And you can see all your credentials here, which is cool because if, say, your API key gets breached or leaked by accident, you could go in here and delete it, for example. Or if you just want to see what is actually connected, you can delete them and manage it all from here. So it's not that you have to go into a specific workflow that has your credentials to access them. You can do it through here. Okay, so we'll go back to the workflow that I'm doing the demo for and back into the Google Sheets node. So we've authenticated. What that means is that anything that's in that email account that's tied to that email in from a Google Sheets perspective, because we're using the Google Sheets node, that's what we expect to see return in the sheet that we're working on. So for this one, I've selected it's a sheet within a document. And then the operation that I want to do is append row. And the reason for that is I want to take all the data that was just scraped out of that API call, and I want to dump it into a new row in the Google Sheet. And the Google Sheet is called Google Lead Gen. So I've picked from list, and from list allows me, as you will see now, we can click on the drop down. And these are the Google Sheets that I have in my Gmail account that's connected to, sorry, you can see all the sheets connected to the Gmail account. All right. So we click on Google Lead Gen, and in the sheet, you have multiple tabs, right? So I've got a few tabs. I've got sheet 1, which was the first sheet that was created. And then I created a second tab called Network Records, which is a little bit of a work in progress. And I'll explain what I'm trying to do with that in a sec. All right. So then you can click on map each column manually or map automatically. I've had good results with map automatically, but sometimes it kind of bugs out, and came back the next day and get it working. So hopefully that's just something that I'm doing. I'm still new to N8N. Then I clicked on refresh. Now I've done it. Anyway, I think because I don't have the data here that has executed from that previous node, it's not appearing for me on the left-hand side. But when it was working, what I did is I dragged it all across over here. And that is how I got these fields. So in that same way of you have the schema view or the JSON view, the table view doesn't allow you to do this. So schema or JSON, one of those tabs, then you can drag those items across. And so what I'm doing is in my spreadsheet that I'll bring up now, I've got different columns. I've got name, address, phone, search term, website, email, LinkedIn. And what is happening is we are mapping those column names. So as you can see, we've got name, address, phone, search term, website. That's all consistent with what we saw in the spreadsheet. Well, that's great. We've got that there. How do we tell N8N that the data from that previous node needs to be placed into the spreadsheet? Well, we do it with these mappings. So we're telling it using the JSON data, hey, the name is JSON title. And the benefit of this is that you will actually see, well, it says JSON title, and you go, well, what is that? The good thing is that it gives you the examples of the results that it has found. So it doesn't just say, I mean, if it's not intuitive, category name, for example. The category name is the business category name, accountants or bookkeepers. And that is how you know what to drag from the left over to the right. And then you can hit test step and you can go and check your spreadsheet. And then all things going well, it will just work. I've had my fair share of problems. So yeah, I hope that works for you. Then I've got this split out node, and what I'm trying to do here is it's setting me up. So the way that N8N works, it works in a linear fashion. Do this, now do this, now do this, now do this. What I've got is I've got a whole bunch of data in this sheet. We've got names, addresses, business categories, LinkedIn, email. For the next step of doing this enrichment on the data itself and identifying the type of network infrastructure that they have, from publicly available records, I don't want to parse all that information through. One, it takes a lot of extra time to parse, and two, it gets more computationally expensive because the API is looking at all this data and having to compute it, and well, someone has to pay for it, and if I'm using an API, that's going to be me. So the split out is just to extract one field, which was website. And the idea behind that is that it takes that and dumps it onto the Google Lead Gen spreadsheet and then plonks it onto the Network Records tab, which is here. And that has completed this for us. Now, we've got that website. What are we going to do with it? This is where the API from Hacker Target comes in. So Hacker Target, it's just the website name, and the idea behind their name is that everyone is a target by hackers, so we should take steps to proactively protect ourselves and identify the vulnerabilities that exist on our systems so that we can be better prepared. Hacker Target is a subsidiary of DNS Dumpster, and DNS Dumpster gives you about 50 API lookups per day. Those lookups are for whois data. When you go onto the whois records, if we go here, and then we'll look at my incident response forensic blog, dfoinsights.com. This is doing a whois lookup. So this pulls back the domain records, shows when the domain was registered, who it was registered by. There's a few changes that have happened with whois records in the past few years. Back in the day, maybe about 5 years ago, up until about 5 years ago, you would see people's names, email addresses, mobile numbers. They would be listed as the technical contacts and other details. These days, privacy changes have come in and you can't see that anymore. But this is an example of a whois record. If you're wondering how it got so technical so quickly, well, I'm kind of wondering that too. But here we are. So what this is telling us is this is giving us some DNS records in this column. And these DNS records are really helpful for finding out things like who is hosting the email, who is the email provider of this domain, and who is the domain host. Sometimes you might get some other data about what cloud services they're using. So you might ask, well, why would we want this information? As the person who I'm generating this tool for runs a cybersecurity business, they wanted to get an understanding whether the technologies that were in use by their potential clients are technologies that they have experience and staff to service these clients on. So for example, if I was running my website in Azure or Google Cloud or AWS, there's generally going to be some particular indicators in the DNS record, in the whois lookup, that will clearly identify that that's the case. So if my mate gets the lead spreadsheet and sees from the MX records, which is Mail Exchange, which is going to reveal the email provider, he gets to see, oh, they're using Gmail or they're using Office 365. The people in his organization might be particularly experienced with one of those platforms, and that means that might qualify that lead just a little bit more. We might see that they're using AWS for their cloud server provider hosting. And again, they actually have a few people who specialize in AWS. So that means that when they reach out, that messaging can be a little bit more targeted and relevant. Or it might go the other way, and turns out that all of these people that we're looking up, all of these leads that we're generating, well, they're all for Google Cloud, and they all are using Google Cloud hosting and Gmail. My mate might have a business that doesn't specialize in servicing clients who use Gmail or Google Cloud, and that would disqualify them from him reaching out to them because it's not a good product fit. There's no synergy there. All right, going back to the spreadsheet, the idea is that we've got this website which we've extracted from API 5, and the idea is using the Hacker Target API to pull down the name server, the MX records, the text records. What's not in this workflow just yet is using an API function to take that a little bit further and do some smarts and extract, they're using Office 365. These are showing up in the MX records, and this is showing up in the cloud records as well. And then they can split that out and build it into more of a spreadsheet. The really fun stuff was that DNS Dumpster has a very easy to consume API query that is provided. I got that working and made it work fine. So I decided to sign up to Hacker Target, paid my subscription fee, and that's when they began. This is how we can use the import curl button. So what you do is you grab that, go back to N8N. Now you don't use their API key, of course. You go import curl, paste, awesome. And then you put your API key in that you've purchased and shows up in your dashboard into here, and you click import, and then it puts in the URL and send query parameters gets turned on, says use fields below. It puts in the name, which is Q, and puts in another couple of headers, output, JSON, name, API key, and value. And now I need to go and delete that API key so that no one can use it. So what I did, I set all this up and was very pleased with myself. Wasn't returning the results that I wanted. I kept trying. I was using ChatGPT to figure out what the syntax problems were and why I was having issues. And part of it, the first one, was that the domains are being returned as http://www.pavecpa.com.au. The way that Hacker Target want to receive the query is different. So we can see in the URL, it's a common way for APIs to work, that they have a question mark. So we're executing something here, and then a Q equals hackertarget.com. So you would replace hackertarget.com with the domain of the website that you want to look up. Going back to the spreadsheet, our stuff is not in that format because when we've extracted it from Google Maps, and the format that it came back with was https://domain.com.au. So what I did, a bit of toing and froing with ChatGPT, and it came back with some really cool regex. And regex is a regular expression, and it allows you to modify text like as a filter using these different characters. Fortunately, we have ChatGPT these days. Just know that using regex is something that's valid, can be valid JSON, and it can save a lot of time and can solve your problems. What I've done here is use regex to strip out that HTTPS, the colons, and the forward slashes, and the www, and just give me a domain.com, which is how I can parse that query to Hacker Target, which is fantastic. Had a few iterations of this, getting it working. And then from there, I started getting errors from Hacker Target saying you are sending too many requests. And I didn't understand. I knew I was getting pretty lively and test something, it doesn't work, go back to ChatGPT and try again, alt tab, try this. Didn't think it was that unreasonable. The issue was I was sending 20 queries per second to their website. So imagine we've got this full list of URLs without any rate limiting. N8N is just going, it's just smashing it. I emailed them and said, hey, look, sorry, I'm doing something wrong here. Not intentionally trying to flood the API with queries. Can you let me know what I'm doing wrong? And they said, look, you're flooding us. Can you restrict it to 2 queries every 1 second? It took a while for me to figure that out, actually. How to get this working. I started using Redis nodes and trying to use wait and all this stuff. It just wasn't working. It was just a hassle. Eventually, someone online, I think on YouTube, put up, just use the batch feature. And I found that by adding an option. Initially, items per batch, 50 and 1,000. So 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. So items per batch, by default, it's set to 50 items. So 50 items a second. what we want to do is we want to go 2 per second, which is 1,000 milliseconds. This is for hacker target at least. I changed that before. What you would have seen is 5,000 milliseconds because I was so unsure whether this was working that I thought, you know what, let's just do 2 items every 5 seconds and we'll see how we go. So that is how that functions, and that's how hacker target is being queried with an API. The idea here is with this third Google Sheets node is that it will update the network records column and it will put in the domain DNS record and MX record and the website. This is a work in progress. Still working on that one, but that is where I'm at, and that is my current idea for building a lead gen platform that does a little bit of OSINT or open source intelligence. So I hope that was interesting. I'm trying to build in public and share what I'm doing and hopefully help someone else on their journey as well. So I hope this was informative, and yeah, catch you in the next one. Bye.